Because we're a global audience, I get global guests on here. But with global guests, time change and my calendar becomes a thing. So thankfully, Will Stubbs, I got myself arranged and I could get you on here. I'm so glad that you would join us. How are you doing?
Amazing. Thank you so much for having us on. Super excited to bring you into the world of Zen.
Well, yeah, World of Zen. First time I saw one of these, I was like, gotta have. And then somehow it was serendipitous. I put this in the ether, and the next thing you email me and saying we want to talk and about the product, and I was like, yes, I want to do this. So let's kick it off like this, Will. The Zen swing stages, putting and golf.
Yeah.
Golf is changing. Golf takes long. There's more and more the advent of the simulator golf and stuff like this. And in the States, we've got the TGL League. And you guys have the perfect product to bring to make it more than just simulator golf, but to make it more realistic with uneven lies and great ways to practice. So to me, it's like the future of the game right now that you guys are sitting on top of.
100%. We call it's a golf course indoors. I mean,
Mhm.
for us, one of our key things is about accessibility.
Yeah.
So we know and understand that this game is not only amazing for everyone who plays it, keeps them healthy, socially interactive, but it's got barriers. And if we can create spaces which are not only more accessible, easy to get to, you can play a round of golf in an hour and a half rather than 4.5 hours. But you can still interact with your friends and you can wear what you like. It's about engagement. It's about bringing people into this game, and we want to be not only that first touch, but that first touch all the way through to elite sport. And that sort of shows in the people who buy our products. We've got aspirational amateurs, we've got your weekend hackers who've still got the money.
Mm.
We've got people who go to local facilities around us, and you've got tour players who use our products. So everyone sort of, when they stand on it, they understand what it actually means to be, a Zen golfer. And I think that's what you're sort of pointing to, is that technology is taking us forwards.
Mhm.
So let's think about how can technology not only take us forwards in terms of the experience, but how does that experience align with learning? And I
Yeah.
think that's where, particularly for us as Zen, that's where we really differentiate ourselves.
Well, that's where you tickle the teaching fancy inside of me. I'm going to make a controversial statement here. We've got this TGL league, and it's all of the PGA tours, blue chips playing
Yeah.
indoors in a sweet environment, and it's kind of quick golf, it's fun golf, it's evening golf. But to me, it's almost a little too surgical, in that they may hit off surfaces like rough and um, grass and bunkers, but it's not uneven like a golf course. And a golf course, I mean, the only flat lies you get is on the teeing ground. Otherwise, it's like, anything goes. Um, it's like what you guys do with the ability to tilt and move the surfaces. It would just take TGL to a different level. Maybe I'm selling for you guys. I don't know, but I'm sure you're on board with this, right? Because I watch it and I'm like, cool, hitting it into a sweet big target over there, but it loses some of the golf to me because they're playing off a flat surface every single time.
Exactly. And I think you point out a perfect point, is that the golf course isn't flat.
Yeah.
That's where we started. So Nick, our founder, he was a putting coach on the European Tour back in the 2000s. And he used to go and work with people like Stenson and stuff. And he used to go and coach them on tour and then come back to his studio, the way which everyone used to coach putting, which was basically on a big carpet,
Hmm.
big AstroTurf carpet. And then he realized that the things which he was doing on the actual greens weren't transferring back into the practice environment, and from the practice environment onto the green. So he's like, well, I need to create a green. It needs to be something which I can change. It needs to be something which is different every single day. And I can use that green to challenge the people, challenge my players. So basically created a green stage in the early, in 2012. Um, it was only made out of wood and, with some turf over the top with some car jacks. And that's where Zen Green Stage sort of started. But the key understanding was that what we're doing is we're trying to replicate the golf course.
Yeah.
And we've come leaps and bounds in terms of how this whole thing's engineered, how it's interactive, how you utilize the different technologies with it to enrich that experience, like TrackMan, Science of Motion, Quintic, and all these other technologies which are on the market now. But ultimately, it comes down to, how do we recreate the experiences which happen on a golf course, and how do we recreate what's called a representative learning environment? Because that's what That's what it's all about. Is that we currently play on a flat. We practice on a flat surface, and we expect the learning which happens here to cross this big chasm onto the golf course. So how many people, you know, with their local club, they'll hit the first shot, and then the next shot they got a downhill left to right shot.
It doesn't work, man. It
It
doesn't
doesn't
work.
happen.
No.
And the way in which we sort of teach this game is it's about gapping your clubs. It's about getting, you know, associated with your distances. It's what's your 100-yard shot? What's your 150-yard shot? What's your 175-yard shot? And then when people go into a golf course, they go, well, my 150-yard club is a 8-iron. I'm going to pull my 8-iron out. I'm going to hit the shot. And it goes, well, it's not ended up going that distance. And it says, well, you know, if you listen to your previous podcast with Alex, he talks about you have to make it's the shot which makes the swing, you know, in the sense that you have to consider the lie, you have to consider the slope, you have to consider where it's going onto. You have to understand it's not just the lie, it's how hard the surface underneath it. Can you bounce through it? What's the angle of attack and everything like that? And it's that which makes golfers. And we need to get ourselves away from just hitting balls on driving range mats, which are flat, to then going, let's start recreating surfaces. Let's recreate the experience of playing golf. And like we talk about with the TGL, like they've gone so far, but they could go a lot further. You
Yeah.
know, just this system which I've got behind me, if you twin it with a launch monitor and into a simulator screen, it's a 16 foot by 8 foot wide. You can hit shots off it and you can hit putts. You can play TGL, you can play a full round of golf indoors in 16 feet. You don't need an arena to go and do that. And if we can encourage people to experience a full round of golf indoors, when they get the opportunity to go and play a full round of golf outdoors in the elements, that transition between indoors to outdoors is going to be a lot more seamless. And that's what we're here to do. Is we don't want people to go away from the lesson and then go onto the course and fall apart, and then come back for a lesson and then go back onto the course and fall apart, because that's where people fall out of love with the game, you know.
You know what? Yes, and one more question before we introduce you properly. But I got to go here. Golfers, we are passionate. We're religious, maybe we're zealots. You
Yeah,
know, too zealous at times. So we make all these investments in new drivers and new putters and new guys. You know, the whole lot. And launch monitors if we have the financial ability. But you're so right, because you make a statement. I've been teaching golf since 1995, right? So I've seen the comings and the goings.
yeah,
And you make a statement here where you're like, golfers work on gapping clubs, golfers work on distance control. And when you hit from an uneven lie, that stuff kind of goes out the window, because it's a variable that I was like, you know, that's right. I kind of knew it deep down, but I'd never been aware of it. So if you fitting new golf clubs, it would behoove you to play off uneven lies too, or to at least get an idea of how the thing travels. I mean, that's like that's simple genius as far as I'm concerned.
yeah. I mean, we currently coach the game. Like we use quite a nice little analogy. So imagine if I want to learn to surf. So I've got my surfboard. I'm ready to go. I'm all geared up. I've got my wetsuit on. I go, right, you know, Mark, right, we're going for a surfing lesson. Right, the surfing instructor goes, right, well done, guys. Welcome. Got your equipment. We're ready to go. Right, just put your boards in the sand. Right, lay down on your board. Now jump up. Right, perfect. Looking great. Right, awesome. Thanks for the lesson. You know, the sea's over there. Go and enjoy the sea. We go in. We have a terrible time. We come back out and we go, man, we need some more lessons. We need to get better at this surfing stuff. So we go back out. We say, hey, buddy, can we have another lesson? And he goes, yeah, no problem. Get your surfboards, put them down in the sand, you know. But this time, you know, widen your feet a little bit, make your arms a little bit wider, stand a little bit different, you know. All right, perfect. Right, I think I've got the position and the posture. Right, high five. Right, go and have fun in the sea. And then we're in this cycle where actually we're trying to learn in an environment which it's impoverished. It's not the same thing, you know. So let's create environments which are the same as where we want to play, and where we want to learn needs to be the same thing, or else
I'm
we're
learning.
going crazy here.
I'm laughing because I learned that way surfing. And when you jump up on the board on the sand, it's way more stable than when you're on a
Yeah,
big wave that's, you know, and the board's bobbing around the show. Strangely, to that personal anecdote, my kids, fortunate, got to learn with Kelly Slater on. He just took them straight in the water and he lay on the board behind them and stabilized a bit. So it was into the water right away, not on the beach first.
yeah.
Okay. Radio Will, we haven't introduced you. You've talked about the company some. Tell us a little bit about you and about, you know, your journey to Zen Golf.
So I was I was I probably my first ever experience of golf was with a little plastic club, probably Tommy Tippy, one of those ones,
Mhm.
made a plastic little wooden driver, and I used to run around the house smashing golf balls around when I was like 2. And then I really didn't play golf again until I was sort of 15, 16, when I sort of fell out of love of like traditional sports. Like if you weren't good enough at football or soccer in the UK.
The Americans, yeah, go on.
Yeah, then there's nothing for you to do apart from go and play against 35-year-old angry men. So I picked up a sport which, me and my brother, we grew up across the road from a little par 3 course, which was public, and we used to sneak on there with a couple of balls in our pockets, play to different greens and different scenarios over trees and all sorts of things. And then when the guy came out, pick our balls up, run into the woods, and then wait for him to disappear. And we transitioned from that first experience to then becoming a member at a golf club and really falling in love with the game. And it was always the playful shots which made us fall in love with it. And then it was my master's research which brought me back into Zen golf. So I actually did my master's thesis, which I did skill acquisition, sport and exercise science, and I focused on skill acquisition. So like the whole learning through is about how we understand and get better at sport. And I looked at putting. I always thought, and this was a time when Dave Pells was about, and there was the
Yeah.
square, stress, stroke, and everything was about being in limiting the amount of movement in the putting stroke and constraining everything. Everyone was using arcs, and everything was like gates and stuff. And I just thought, what happens if we just have a look at someone's putting stroke on different slopes, and let's see what happens. And so back
Golly,
in
I mean, that's a
2012.
podcast. Sorry, that's a podcast in itself because I'm sure the research and the data there, I'm sure results plummeted. Yeah, am I crazy?
Well, what happened was that so got a load of different golfers,
Mhm.
did a baseline test on flat, and then we did 1% right to left, 1% left to right, 2%, 2%, and 3%, 3%. But obviously varied them. So you had you might go 1%, then 3% left to right, and then right to left. And everyone had a different putting thing. But what we
Uh-huh.
did is just tested them. So 10 putts using science of motion. So look, at everyone's seen the sort of a science of motion thing. Basically, what it does is attaches to the golf club. It gives you all these different metrics on face angle and path. But what we found was every single golfer had their own stroke for every slope.
Are you
So
ready?
their slope changed from slope to slope. Their stroke changed because the environment's changed. So their slopes changed, their postures changed, their balance points changed, their weight is changed when in their feet. So when you're on a 2% left to right slope compared to a right to left slope, what's going to change? Your weight's going to be in your heels versus your toes. Your angles are where your shoulders are going to be. That means your arms are going to drop different, which means the club's going to interact with the ground different. But what we found is that everyone had a really consistent stroke for that slope,
Okay.
but it was a different stroke for every single slope. So
Gosh.
there was no such thing as, just like what we talk about now with golfers. Like you look at Scotty Scheffler, he's got his own swing. Rory's got his own swing. What we don't understand is that everyone's actually got their own swing for that one specific environment. So how
Yeah.
can we teach technique when we actually just need to teach skill? And the skill's in how do we read the game and how do we understand the environment which we're in. Because at the moment, if we look at how we teach the game of golf, just like what the surfer sort of talks about, is that at the moment we're trying to say that the environment's in the head, and the whole game's in our head. When actually our head's in the environment. You flip that on its head, and then you go, well, actually, if my head's in the environment, I need to see what's going on out here. So for me to actually understand how to solve the problem, which is the shot in front of me right now, I need to experience that environment. I need to go and explore in that environment. And I can only explore in that environment and solve the problem of the environment if that variety is in my practice. And that's what we do here. We create we create systems which recreate the golf course, which recreate the variability which you experience on the golf course. So you have to learn to adapt. It's like if you ran on concrete and then you ran on ice, you're going to run differently. The environment has changed. Even if the task of running is still the same.
You
Putting is still putting, but you're on a different slope. So your stroke's going to change. You become a different being.
You're getting me so excited. My earpiece is falling out. I honestly, when you were talking like that, I actually got like a warm feeling across my body, and I was like, you know, in the era of all this information right now, it's your the argument you make and the research you've done. It's almost making practice of a flat surface a moot point
Yeah.
with everything that you share. And
War
I'm
on
like,
mats.
gosh, and it makes so much sense because, just from my eye test, I've taught thousands of lessons where, people will go away and will come for the lesson. You help them with the technique, you build some sort of consistent ball flight. But that's a function of when you go and play, the wind and the lie and all these external factors you have absolutely no control of. And along
Mm.
those lines, I've just come back from the Players Championship 25 broadcast where the weather was perfect, then ghastly, then perfect, then terrible.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me, it's something I'd heard from Nick Faldo. One day he was irate on a broadcast with me, and he goes, "They only practice with their A for their A game. They never practice for their B and C and D games," which is
Mm.
like him saying, you're not always going to have it.
Yeah.
Where I took that, and when I was watching this golf and talking about it, I was like, Rory, here he is finally, where he's practiced
Mm.
for the bad eventualities. Because when things were good and he was swinging great, he'd dust fields by 8, 9, 10. And then when stuff got a bit adverse, then he'd sort of disappear a little bit. But now all of a sudden, what you're saying is so appropriate. And I talked about this on one other YouTube thing where I was like, you should be practicing for every eventuality, not just for your perfect day. And now you are now taking what I sort of feel in my soul, and you're like, this is how you should practice every single day. It's not just like go out there and block practice 7 irons. Yeah, skill acquisition, sure, but our our examination on the course is changing constantly.
Of course it is. And I think what we're trying to seek when we go and practice at the moment is what people would call confidence. They're
Yeah,
trying to build a technique which they feel confident in. But the problem which they've got is that we're not building confidence and competence together, because competence is your ability to execute a skill. And if you're just practicing a technique, that you may as well just do gymnastics. Because we're here for, if you want to look good on a golf swing, then it doesn't that might not transfer to the course. It's about creating a robust golfer. So, like the amount of times when you've talked about, Jordan Spieth, when he was on the court, when he was on the podcast, and what'll be exciting is when we go to the Masters, is what we find when you see people who play at the Masters and people who play at the British Open is that actually it's probably the most adaptable golfers who win. It's the
yeah,
people who see the wide line, and that's what Jordan talks about when he plays at the Masters, and why it suits him, Augusta, because he's a guy who likes to put a lot of spin on it because he grew up on that little rock
beautiful green. Yeah,
solid chipping green where he had to learn to spin the hell out of it to keep it on the green.
yeah.
And because of that, he loves to play with spin on all his clubs. He likes to shape the ball. So when he goes to an environment which encourages him to shape it because of the lies are so extreme, it suits him. He can see the opportunities in that environment. And that's where confidence and competence comes together, because that's an environment built for him, and it's an environment which he feels comfortable in and confident in, which is why in the past we've seen him be such an incredible champion around there. And for us, our passion is, right, we need to stop people thinking about building confidence away from the golf course. We need to build confidence and competence together. And you do that through varied practice, you do that through challenge, you do that through stretch, and you do that through representative learning environments.
It's
So,
as you talk, I have my wife's voice in my head, because she comes from a golfing family. She's part Scottish, and we have a daughter who's talented, and she goes, she needs to play more, and she says this all the time. She goes, you and her need to get off the range, and she needs to go and play more, because when we were young, we learned on the course. We didn't have fancy driving ranges and stuff,
mm,
and certainly didn't have driving ranges where you had to someone would pick up the balls for you. You had to go and hit them and pick them up and come back.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so we learned playing, and it makes a lot of sense, but it's just so easy to go and I call it intellectually lazy, where you
yeah,
just go, I'm going to go and work on my technique a little bit. And with the advent of shows like this and YouTube and 24/7 social media with people putting golf tips out everywhere, and they sound sexy as hell, then we go and work on technique, as opposed to, where your point, the skill of hitting from uneven lies.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Let's get to the nuts and bolts, the practical aspect of for the folks who aren't familiar with Zen swing stages, the green and the hitting area.
Yeah.
Talk about this area. You talked about the size, but talk about how they work, and what the add-ons are, that if people had to get one of these, how they can use it for different purposes.
Yeah, so we sort of have three different stages. We've got the the green stage, which is putting only.
Yeah.
So we do them in three different sizes: 12 foot, 16 foot, and 20 foot long. We always do them 8 foot wide. We've got the what we class as the golf stage. We're doing 12 foot and 16 feet, and that's what we call like the round of golf indoors.
Yeah.
And then we've got the swing stage, which is a 6 feet by 6 feet long, 8 foot wide. And that's what we put in predominantly sim rooms or on driving ranges or in VIP suites on driving ranges, more academy stuff.
Yeah.
But so with a swing stage, you might be looking at twinning it with TrackMan and do indoor simulated golf, or you might be actually putting it with a launch monitor, say like a Foresight, and hitting out onto a driving range and taking the data,
Flight
or
scope,
a sky,
flight scope
fly
over
scope,
here, right?
for
Okay.
example. Yeah, exactly, dude.
Uh-huh.
With something like a golf stage, you've got that full round of golf indoors, so you just pick and choose what you'd like to play with. Your flight scope and E6 is perfect. And they've just got their Apex software, which is amazing. But say for a putting stage, for your green stage, you've got your science and motion, you've got your projector systems, you've got Quintic. You can really enrich that whole experience to be able to actually get meaningful data out of it. And then if we take it a step even further, you start looking at like force plates, and you look at if you see what, like, some people like that, like Daniel Gray at Lake Nona, he's got a swing stage with embedded with swing catalyst force plates, and he's taking tour players' data and understanding how they are changing their biomechanics and timing of their swing based on how he's changing the slope, which is like mind-blowing stuff. But it's the edge of like where this game is going. Is we're starting to understand the human again, rather than just understanding the golf swing. The swing came before the book, but then we put the book in front of the swing. So
Right.
hopefully we're getting the swing back again, which is going to be amazing.
I
I
want to
tell you
talk.
what, would you like to if
Yeah,
I
yeah.
tell you what, I've got.
Real quick first.
Yeah,
Because you've got the putting green behind you, correct?
I've got a putting green and I've got my swing stage over there set up. If you
Okay,
want to go
perfect.
and have a look at that.
Um, okay, yeah. As you do it, we'll describe to folks too, because you talk about skill. I think green reading is a skill, and then I feel like there's an emotional, sort of a mental aspect to that too, where it's like trusting the read. And when
Yeah.
you guys are able to project the line down on the ground on a certain
Mm.
percentage slope, the golfers I've seen on this, it's like eye popping. They're like, "Geez, is it that much?" And then when you start to hit the ball with the correct speed down there, that's when green reading improves. And to me, that's where scores start to lower. And then
Mm.
I'm a big one as an instructor for just using uneven lies as training aids. Ball above the feet, ball below the feet, downhill, uphill, all that sort of stuff. But adding that, or adding the data of force plates and launch monitors and stuff, that I'd not even considered that, to be very honest with you. But now it's like you're opening the book for me too, and I'm going, well, gosh, I mean, we could go. The sky's the limit with this stuff. All right,
It
well,
really is.
yeah,
No, it really
why
is.
don't you demo for us?
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what. We'll jump on the green stage first, and we'll just
Right.
explore, just like we were talking about. How do we start understanding how to read a putt? You
Mhm.
know, and what's the difference between hitting on a flat and practicing on flat versus practicing on real? So
Okay,
go
cool.
for it.
Let's do it while you do that, or while you go set up. I'll just talk people
Yeah.
through it. For the folks, you can go to Zen's website. The website is zen.golf, and they essentially, let's call them hitting mats, putting mats that are variable. You can move them. You can change slope. You can change tilt. You can change if it's on a putting green, breaks, uphill, downhill, side hill, and even cooler when you're hitting shots, you can go off uneven lies. Oh yeah. So Will's got the camera tilted up. And we're
I'm
gonna,
just,
mm,
we're just trying to get it sorted so it can go onto our other camera. Ah, okay. So we did have something set up where we could go onto um, someone's phone, but we'll work it out.
okay,
So there we go. That's not too bad there.
there we are. Perfect. We can see the green now. Okay.
Yeah. So for example, say like the traditional way in which people would put would be right. You know, I'm going to practice. I'm going to pull 3 balls out because it's a sleeve of three Pro Vs or what have you. Going to drop them down. I'm going to hit one left. I'm going to hit one right. I'm going to hit one straight. And that's when people go, all right, I'm sorted. And then I walk to the first tee.
Yeah.
But what we want is we say, right, actually, I'm going to come here. I'm going to create, you know, a random slope.
Okay.
So the system for me is just going to choose. So what I've actually ended up with is an uphill double breaker.
All right.
So from here, right, so how am I going to solve this problem? So instantly, instead of it just being about a technique thing, about right, where do I need to take the club back, represent to my body, I need to start up here. I need to move over to the hole. I need to go right. Where's the straight put? The straight
Uh-huh.
put to the hole's here. So how am I going to bring it on this journey between here and where's the pace? So what is this funnel of speed which I need to be able to understand? And now my brain's going, and it's more about not about where's my stroke and where's my grip and where's my hands moving, where's my body, where's my posture, but it's actually like, well, what is in front of us? What's the problem which we need to solve, and how are we going to solve it? So it's about right, what journey is this ball going to come on? And
Uh-huh.
instantly you're starting to think about this is what a lot of people would call deep practice. It's not
Mhm.
just about hitting balls, it's about deep practice. And you might stand up there and you're just thinking about right, where's that ball going and where's the journey which it needs to go on for it to come all the way back to my putter. Oh.
And for the audio listener, he's just missed it on the high side. But Will walked over there and he goes, well, I'm just going to hit the button, which he did. And the green adjusted to a certain slope. So the stage that he's standing on just changed. And so all of a sudden, you are like when you're on the golf course, where all of a sudden you've got uphill right to left. And the next thing you may have downhill left to right. And that could
That's it.
happen on the same green, and therein lies the challenge where, and with this, all of a sudden, you could kind of almost be playing your round of golf, but you are practicing the ability to adapt, which is something you talked about, Will.
100%. And I've just pressed it again, and now I've got a downhill right to left. There's more right to left on my feet than there is at the hole. And
Okay.
one of the things actually which I really like to explore is, what happens when it's flat at the hole but breaking at my feet. That really messes with people's perception because they're looking at the hole, and the feet is like, oh, it's breaking loads, but it's not breaking loads, and they end up hitting this ball well outright because they're feeling it with their feet.
Yeah.
When you've got to feel the whole environment, haven't you? you
Mm-hmm.
know um so it's like you say, it's like it's not only just experiencing the whole round of golf indoors. Like I've done myself with that one on the low side that time.
You
But
missed
it's
low.
that
You missed on
ability
the
to
amateur side.
it's that ability to recreate the golf course, but then it's also then say, right, let's take my stats from when I last played. Let's take my experiences from the last page.
Hmm.
What putts did I struggle with? What distances did I struggle with? Let's go recreate those.
Yeah.
Because say if I've got this ability where I can go to my local golf club and we've got a green stage, or I can go to my local facility and they've got a green stage, and I can go right. I struggled with, uphill right to left puts, Let's go and actually go on there and let's recreate those experiences. Let's recreate those challenges. Let's understand, right, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Is it about pace? Is it about line? Is it about how I'm reading the green? Is it about my pre-shot routine and how I'm preparing myself mentally for it? You know?
What you say there is so true. And me being an on-course announcer for CBS in the tour, um, oftentimes I'm looking for trends. And the trends like that's where data, I think, does not give all of the information, because if you might just miss you miss a few fairways, like, well, your driving's bad. But it's situational. It's more than that. You could have like into a left to right wind, or you miss a few iron shots that, they've all been off downhill lies, or whatever the case might be. So that's where you take that practice and you just kind of, get to the nitty gritty of it a bit more. It's not like, well, I was weak with my irons. It's more than that.
Yeah.
It's the situational element to the whole thing.
Yeah, you've got this ability to not only recreate the golf course, but recreate your experiences on the golf course.
Hmm.
And it's, you know, we talked to some coaches and he says they're like, well, this now allows me to solve the problems which keep my, you know, my players up all night. You know, it keeps them worrying. It's the things where people, it's ultimately like if we have this ability where we can recreate this stuff, then we should be able to like banish yips because
Yeah,
if we
well,
can provide an environment where someone can actually go back and in a psychologically safe environment to go and practice the things which really, you know, they struggle with and recreate it in their own safe space, then, you know, everyone's going to start loving this game.
I'm going to make a statement here. Might come off as kind of controversial to start, but if you think about it, it's actually truth. Because when I have been hired or asked to give on course lessons, I'll give them the course management decision. Look, that's the smart place to hit it, or whatever the case might be. But that's a function of whether you can hit the ball there. And if you got some layoff that you can't play off, you know, it's easy for us to stand out there on the golf course and go, okay, well, you're going to hit the ball there. But if you've practiced it, then you can go, okay, I've got a downhill lie. There's water on the left hand side. So now I know how I can make sure I don't hit the ball in there because I've practiced appropriately before I go for the on course lesson. Are you feeling me there?
100%. It's about, you know, it's sort of like your perception versus reality,
Yeah.
isn't it? And
Yes.
the closer we can bring them together through experiences, the better it'll be. The more confident we'll be, the more competent we'll be, the better experience we'll have when we go and play that round of golf. And the better, I think, as well for me, is we're developing that awareness of the person, which I think is super important.
Mm-hmm.
Because when, say, someone's come for a lesson for you with you, it's that they don't want to hear your voice in their head. They want to hear their voice in their own head.
Yeah.
If that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And the only way where they're going to get that is by if they're the people who are solving the problems.
Well,
And they're only going to solve them if they understand how to solve them
well,
in an environment like this.
Well, perhaps I have the luxury of experience in teaching because I've done it for so long. But
Yeah.
I've realized in teaching there's two things you don't do. You don't ruin the athlete within. You don't do that. That is the worst mistake a teacher can make. And then the second thing is allow the athlete to answer their own questions. You know, lessons learned are better than lessons heard. And like I can teach you how to do it all day long, but until you go and kind of take the lesson and make it your own, and then bring your own spin back to the teacher, you're never really going to have ownership of it. And you talk about Jordan on this podcast. Colin Morikawa spoke of how he and his coach would have the self-discovery time where he'd get the lesson, then he'd go off, and then he'd go and tinker with it. Then he'd bring the information back to his coach and say, well, if you were looking for X, I've got to do this to make that happen. And the coach goes, yeah, baby, you're on. And this is where this environment allows that period of self discovery. I can't tell you, especially with my daughter now, how she's getting to a place where previously she was just taught well so she could swing well. But now she's coming back to me and I ask her something and she goes, well, I didn't do it because of this. And I'm like, praise the Lord. You know, and she understands the thing completely. And I preach understanding over knowledge all day when it comes to this show and all year, all the time to everyone else, because it's one thing to know it, but it's another thing to get it. And what your guys' Zen stages have is the ability or the potential to have people go and practice and truly get it. You know, and then I think it's almost like a no holds barred thing because all of a sudden you're practicing off that downhill lie, hitting or, you know, putting, whatever it might be. And you're like, gosh, you know, when I do this, then I get that result. So it's kind of like Hogan's talking about digging it out of the dirt. Well, you're not digging dirt here, but you're practicing in the appropriate environment.
100%. I mean, I think just sort of harking back to what Colin's talking about is I think we should like move towards this, you know, approach of golfers like play, learn, perform.
Yeah.
Like you might go away, you might have like, I'm going to go out on the course, I'm going to play, I'm going to not keep score, I'm going to keep, but my ultimate aim is to have the best time doing the most ridiculous shots possible because that's stretching my bandwidth of variability, my bandwidth of what's possible. You know, it's my degrees of freedom. You
Yeah.
know, if you look at Tiger Woods, you talked about those 9 windows, you know, but he'll go and hit those 9 windows before he goes and plays around a golf. And he goes, you know what? I've actually got 4 out of 9. You know, I'm just going to play with those shots
Yeah.
today. So it's that let's play, let's learn what we have within our vocabulary. let's then spend those times, if we're going to go a deep learning session, let's go and drill into bunker shots. Let's go and drill into, wedge shots or approach shots. Let's go into shot shaping with our driver, and let's drill into that with variability, and then go and perform. And then that's when it's like, right, how can I go and solve the problems of the course? How can I adapt? How can I get the best score I'm around? But if we can do that in an environment which either you can do it at home or you can do it at your local golf club, your local golf facility, and you can have play, learn, perform environment which is replicating a golf course, then the possibilities are infinite. And hopefully, we see a lot more people taking, like what you talked about, ownership over that learning journey, becoming, self-actualized golfers, which is pretty exciting.
That would make me happy. Okay. In the interest of time, for people who want to lobby their club professional or their club to get one of them, or if they have the ability to do so, will please direct folks to where they can go to find out more information about the ZEN stages.
Yeah, so as you mentioned before, zen.golf is our website. You can get all the information on there. And then all our social media channels are Zen Green Stage. So that's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, TikTok, Threads. You can find a load of cool information on there. See lots of different case studies, see lots of different information of how we use them, how other people use them, how a lot of our, our ambassador coaches use them. So you'll see a lot of different ways in which people utilize a moving floor, and hopefully you'll see that the way in which they're doing it is pretty exciting, and it inspires either yourself or a few people to sort of move towards our way of thinking.
I'm very excited. Okay, you're a very smart guy. I'm sure people are like, well, I want to hear more from Will as well. Do you have social that people can follow you?
I used to be on Twitter a lot, but no, to be fair, my social media, I don't. I spend most of my time at work, so sadly. But maybe that's something which I need to start again.
Yeah, at work or parenting, because I know you've got little ones in the house.
I do, yeah. Little Albie, he's only 3 months old. He's the best thing in the world.
Right, lovely. Well, if he's going to play golf, get him on a Zen swing stage, would you please? Okay, listen, fantastic stuff. I really appreciate you. This is a game changer, and it's honestly, in my opinion, a worthy investment. And I'm so glad you guys would reach out so we can show it off, because it's so worthwhile.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the listeners for dealing with the UK accent and probably sticking with it. So thank you so much, and thank you, Mark, for having us on.
My pleasure.